Gemar Chatima Tova. When I heard that day in August of 2015 that Dr. Oliver Sacks had died, I wasn't surprised. 6 months earlier, in the New York Times op-ed, he announced that the melanoma in his eye had metastasized to his liver and that he was in the late stages of terminal cancer. I was nonetheless profoundly sad, and I felt a deep sense of loss. As the New York Times stated in its obituary for him, Sacks explored some of the brain's strangest pathways in best-selling case histories, using his patients' disorders as starting points for eloquent meditations on consciousness and the human condition. Like his life, Sacks's death touched many. It certainly touched mine. The late Robin Williams' powerful portrayal of him in the film Awakenings exposed Sacks and his work to a wide popular audience. In his very last op-ed, which was entitled My Own Life, Sacks not only shared the news announcing his impending demise, he recounted his response to learning that he had terminal cancer. I made a note to myself that his column might make for fertile material for a future sermon on Yom Kippur, when Jewish tradition beckons us to face our mortality. Luckily, I found it as I was unpacking boxes for my study at home. Here's what Sacks wrote. I feel grateful that I have been granted 9 years of good health and productivity since the original diagnosis. But now I am face to face with dying. The cancer occupies a third of my liver, and though its advance may be slowed, this particular sort of cancer cannot be halted. It is up to me now to choose how to live out the months that remain to me. I have to live in the richest, deepest, most productive way I can. That last bit stayed with me. To me, the ending of Sacks's piece summarizes the core message of this day of Yom Kippur. None of us ever knows when we will draw our last breath. None of us knows how many pages are left for us to write on in tradition's metaphorical book of life. To paraphrase Oliver Sacks, it is up to us, each of us, how to live out the life that is to be ours. It's during this time of the Jewish year when we are called to assess our lives. We are called to answer the question, how do I want to live my life in the richest, deepest, most productive way I can? This past summer, I also got around to reading The Road to Character, written by New York Times columnist David Brooks. Brooks' writing often makes me stop and think, even when I don't agree with him, and that's often. I read Brooks because he always challenges my sense of the way the world should be, what my perspective is. I believe that The Road to Character is a very important book. On this Yom Kippur, I want to lift up a powerful and central part of his thesis. Brooks posits that we live our lives by two different sets of virtues, what he calls resume virtues and eulogy virtues. He writes, resume virtues are the ones you list on your resume, the skills that you bring to the job market and that contribute to your external success. The eulogy virtues are deeper. They're the virtues that get talked about at your funeral, the ones that exist at the core of your being, whether you are kind, brave, honest, faithful. What kinds of relationships you formed. Most of us would say that the eulogy virtues are more important than the resume virtues. Brooks proceeds to confess that for long stretches of my life, I've spent more time about the latter than the former. Brooks contends that we live in a world that celebrates the resume virtues and demands that we enhance those values. Think about that for a moment. Which set guides you in your daily lives? Over the last 24 years, I have written hundreds of eulogies. And there have been times while preparing one that my mind would drift to wondering what might be said at my own funeral. With his book, Brooks handed me and hands all of us a useful framework for reflecting on our lives, along with Oliver Sacks's words. It is now up to us to choose how to live out the time granted us. We each must live in the richest, deepest, most productive way we can. This is the focus to which we are called on this Yom Kippur. As we engage in Cheshbon HaNefesh, taking stock of our soul, of our life, we should ask ourselves David Brooks's question: by which set of virtues am I living? This is what we must ask ourselves today. Am I on the path I want to be on? Am I living the legacy that I want to leave to my loved ones when it comes time for someone to reflect on my life? Part of what drew me in as I read Brooks' book earlier was the fact that in unpacking his notion of resume and eulogy values, he drew on one of the most powerful Jewish theological works of the 20th century, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik's Lonely Man of Faith. I studied it in rabbinical school, and I've returned to it many times over the years. Often referred to as the Rav, Soloveitchik was one of the most important figures in modern Orthodoxy and Jewry in a larger sense during the last century. In Lonely Man of Faith, Soloveitchik writes of a distinction between two paradigmatic figures in the creation narrative as we read them in the opening chapters of Genesis. He names these figures Adam 1 and Adam 2. Soloveitchik compares and contrasts these two models as emblematic of the struggle central in each human. Brooks borrows these two figures to flesh out his two models of virtue. He names Adam 1 as the career-oriented, ambitious, largely externally focused person. Adam 1 wants to build, create, produce, and discover things. There are measures of Adam 1 in each of us. It's driven, at least in part, by the Yetzer Hara, which is often described as the evil inclination. But over the centuries, our teachers have noted that describing Yetzer Hara simply as evil is too facile. In the Talmud, we are taught that the Yetzer Hara plays an important role in human creativity. Adam 2, as Soloveitchik presents it, and as Brooks elaborates on it, is the more internally focused person. Adam 2 wants to attain a serene, inner character and may outwardly appear quiet. Adam 2 has developed a solid sense of right and wrong. For Brooks, this is the person who is not driven, or is at least not primarily driven, by the desire to attain worldly success. Adam 2 sees success as having a transcendent, sacred purpose. Adam 1 wants to know how do things work? Adam 2 seeks to understand why things exist. Adam 1's motto is success. For Adam 2, life is a moral dilemma. Adam 2 is driven by charity, or might we say tzedek and tzedakah, love and redemption. Consciously or not, each of us struggles with both of these natural human inclinations. Rav Soloveitchik writes that we live in the contradiction between Adam 1 and Adam 2. To this, Brooks adds, our task in life is to master the art of living between these two sides of human nature. He recounts the stories of numbers of figures, well known, others lesser known, so that we can witness how certain people have lived the struggle between and on the road to character. In each chapter, Brooks focuses on a particular dimension of character: self-conquest, struggle, self-mastery, dignity, love, self-examination, and more. I thought as I read each chapter that the great subtitle for the book could have been Profiles in Character. And by book's end, David Brooks has laid out a curriculum, as it were, for pursuing character development. Indeed, in his final chapter, he offers a summary of his key points. Each point could have been a stepping off point for a worthwhile message on this holy day. In our busy lives, many of us don't take or make the time for reflection. We don't pause often enough for introspection, for cheshbon hanefesh, the soul work our tradition prescribes as a healthy part of living. This soul work is not relegated just for today. Jewish tradition erects a framework to enable us in self-reflection. We must each embrace the path that suits us best. It may be through worship, by engaging in regular study, or by the work of tzedek, the pursuit of justice, or it might be by all three. Musar, the ethical, educational, and cultural movement founded by Rabbi Israel Salanter in the 19th century in Lithuania, is one of our tradition's pathways to examining and perfecting ourselves. While reading Brooks's book, I realized Musar can be viewed as a Jewish road to character. The opportunity for self-reflection can come by entering what Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel calls that palace in time, Shabbat, which can aid us in slowing down, stepping back, and reflecting. In today's world, at least in the pre-COVID-19 world, we were educated and pushed to enhance our Adam 1 side. We were encouraged to pursue our resume virtues. A successful life is so often defined as a life of material success and recognition of that success by those who are around us. The Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, the high holy days, however, call us to embrace our Adam 2 side. The liturgy of these days of awe, and most especially the Vidui confession that we recite throughout the Yamim Noraim, and especially on this day, calls us to focus on that more internal landscape. Vidui is our tradition's acknowledgement of human frailty. In the eyes of our tradition, it is inevitable that we will, in the course of living our lives, fail in one and often more ways. Our communal confession pushes us to consider our sense of purpose, our place in the moral drama of life. Do you remember those quieter moments, the ones before the din of those competing Zoom meetings and homeschooling, when we allowed ourselves to turn inward and face our hearts and souls, our lives as individuals. While it may be more challenging now, we are still called to check our internal moral compass. With each High Holy Day season, we promise to make adjustments that will play an important role as we steer ourselves into a new and better year, for which we pray and hope that we will be inscribed in the book of life. Then we charge back into the fray of our daily life. But now, times are dramatically different. On this day, in the middle of the worst pandemic in over 100 years, when we have all faced an existential threat and existential challenges, we should ask ourselves these existential questions. What is my intention for the year ahead? Will I focus only on my resume values, on my resume virtues? Will I also think and act in regard to my eulogy values? Am I only working on Adam 1, or can I also set as a goal work on my Adam 2 side? Brooks admits that he wrote the book as an act of challenging himself, as he is not sure that he can actually follow the path of character. By sharing his act of self-reflection, I believe that he has offered us a model and given us all a framework with which to engage ourselves in this significant act of self-examination. As we log off tonight, after we hear that final Tekiah Gedolah, that last great blast of the shofar, and we march into a new year, we can choose the ways in which we will each continue the process of reflection and course correction. One final notion that David Brooks presents is what he calls a crooked timber approach to life. He brings this notion from a teaching of philosophy from the great philosopher Immanuel Kant, who wrote, "Out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing has ever been made." Brooks uses this notion of crooked timber to reflect what he terms a moral realist's approach to the reality that we are all flawed. Character, writes Brooks, is built in the struggle against our own weaknesses. A crooked timber approach to life does not excuse failings. It acknowledges that we are, all of us, to varying degrees, weak, foolish, and sometimes just plain inexplicable. Living as a crooked timber is acknowledging and accepting that we are, each of us, in some way, broken. And right now, who doesn't feel that way in one degree or another? Our Adam 2 side asks us to approach this brokenness in the struggle to perfect ourselves and to repair what is broken, which can lead us all to strengthening our character. It can help us strike the appropriate balance between resume and eulogy virtues, between our Adam 1 and our Adam 2 sides. There is no single path for each and every person. Each of us has our own struggles to meet, our own challenges to face. Yet the power of relationship and community allows us each to walk our particular path without facing that struggle alone. This day, we take a long, hard look at ourselves. The road to character, both for David Brooks and for our Jewish tradition, passes again and again through life in the world, through our daily interactions with family, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and even strangers. May we carry our words of contrition during this great and awesome day and turn to living in what we pray will be a year that will enable us to forget just how truly awful and horrific the last year has been. May the year to come be a year of peace, a year of normalcy, a year of redemption, a year of health, a year of wellness for everyone. May we live the commitments we make this day to one another, to God, and perhaps most importantly, to ourselves. May we carry Oliver Sacks' words as a charge for life in the year before us. It is up to me now to choose to live out the months that remain to me. I have to live in the richest, deepest, most productive way I can. Gamar Chatima Tova. May you and your loved ones be inscribed and sealed in the book of life for a year of sweet blessings and a year of good health.